This is I'm Sorry I Wasn't Listening episode 13.
13.
Dang,
Man.
13.
It's been a pleasure.
No, it has been. And then 20 soon. Just watch.
Very soon.
I'm here with my boy Reggie.
Sure.
Andrew, how you doing, brother?
It's a good life. I'm hard pressed for complaints, you know. It's a difficult one, but
I feel that.
but I don't think I would want an easy one. I've been thinking about that more, and we don't have to bother ourselves with that topic now, but
yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I have been thinking about, I've been really enjoying some of the difficulties, or learning to enjoy them, you know?
Yeah. No, I feel you. No, same. I've kind of, I think we had that conversation a little bit, not to dive too into it. Kind of the positivity of just going through difficulty and kind of overcoming that. So I love it. But today, Reggie and I were kind of talking, and a topic that we kind of wanted to dive into, and I kind of wanted to pick Reggie's brain on, is the definition of a good person. So I kind of conducted a little, I guess, experiment or a poll,
Okay.
per se, just on what a good person means. And before I kind of let out my results, I wanted to kind of pick your brain what the definition of a good person means to you.
Okay. A good person to me is someone who is of service. A good person to me is someone who is good to themselves. A good person to me is someone who leads with positive intent.
Do you think, because I think this is, before I kind of talk about, my findings, do you think it kind of differs from person to person what they define as a good person, or if the actual definition has changed over time?
Yes. It definitely differs from person to person.
Okay, how so?
I could see in one aspect, if you were a protector of your family, you could justify things that maybe someone who is not a protector could not justify. So let's say if you were military and you've had to go to war, and you know what it looks like to fight against an adversary who, from your perspective, would damage or completely remove your home and your livelihood if you did not do so otherwise, And then I could see a monk who believes that peace is the only option, and the only response to violence should be peace.
Oof.
So,
okay.
So yeah, perspective is powerful.
Yeah,
and
100%.
Yeah.
So the reason I asked is I had this pondering thought. I always be thinking, especially when we talk, I always be thinking a lot, especially like when I'm by myself, I'm driving, and this thought's been kind of just more sitting in my head, kind of marinating. That's the word that I was looking for. Marinating in my head of just good people. I've been surrounded by some great people. I've also been surrounded by some pretty shitty people. Excuse my language, but I got this thought, and I decided, I was like, you know what? And I talked to you about it. I was like, let me take this poll. Let me ask just, friends, people that are more acquaintances, what they consider. So I asked two questions. I was like, what do you consider a good person? And then if I wasn't in the room, would you wholeheartedly say that I'm a good person, and why? And so it was full transparency. I was like, my feelings won't be hurt. I take criticism super, super well. And I asked a good amount of people, a good 10 to 15, 20 people over a span of like a month or two, because I wanted to get genuine answers. And so what I came across was a lot of people, in the most basic term, said loyalty.
Okay.
Loyalty. And I was like, okay. And so then I asked the people, I was like, okay, so then now the second question, what do you say? And I was like, wholeheartedly. Most of them said, and this wasn't even to stroke my own ego or anything like that, because I genuinely wanted to know if I was a good person. I think I'm a good person, but does everyone else see me? Because again, you said perspective. Perspective is a huge thing. Especially for me. And so I asked these people, I was like, okay, that second question, what wholeheartedly would you say I'm a good person? And a good amount of them did come to the conclusion that, yeah, no, you're a good person. And I said, okay, is it because of what you stated, loyalty? And they're like, yeah, you're very much a loyal person. You're loyal to the T. You're very servanthood. And that was the second thing. So loyalty and being a servant. And so I started just thinking on that. Okay, what is it that I can continue to do or do better to continue to be a good person and show other people to be a good person? And that's kind of what I came down to, and that's why I'm asking you this. Would you say both of those things are true?
They can be.
How so?
They most certainly can be. If you value those concepts as a framework to being a good person, then most certainly, yeah. Perspective.
Now, would you say, and you can take a minute or two, would you say that you yourself are a good person? Would you consider yourself?
I don't need a minute or two, yes. And I'm not saying that you do this, but something that you didn't ask that I would ask of you now is, do you need anyone else to tell you that you're a good person?
Not... No and yes. No in the aspect because I know who I am and I know how I was raised, and I know that I'm a good person. But yes, in the sense of I know that as a human being, as an individual who's had a lot of growing, that we have a tendency as humans to kind of have this simple, in simple words, a kind of to go off the beaten path, and to kind of go off this path where you think you're doing good, but and other people's eyes like, oh man, you're not who you are. Does that make sense?
I hear you. However, I would propose an idea.
Let me hear it.
When you change, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're no longer a good person. It just means that you've changed.
Okay.
And change should have a very positive connotation to it that it has strayed away from in recent years.
Okay.
Change is good. And if somebody comes up to me and says, and ideally this is what I imagine the situation you're proposing is, you go up to somebody and they're like, you're not who you used to be. That doesn't mean I'm no longer a good person. That just means I've evolved. That means I've grown. That means I'm not the person that I used to be. To which I would say, thank you, because I want to evolve. If you met me today, and then in 20 years you met 47-year-old Reg, and he was the exact same person, and you're like, man, you haven't changed a day, I would personally take offense to that. Now, if you said, I've changed my nature in regards to my values, I would ask, okay, how did they change? There's more questions that I would ask, but I'll be honest with you, and this may rub some people the wrong way, and I'm very much okay with that. I don't genuinely care what most people think. Do I still face embarrassment? Yes. Do I still face fear? Yes. Am I still scared to walk into a room of 30,000 people and speak? Of course, just like everybody else or most people. But I don't, in a one-on-one scenario, care what 99.9999 times to the triple to the 10th to the whatever. I don't care what people think. I care what my mother thinks, because my mother knows me. I care what Cristobal thinks, because Cristobal knows me. I care what Big Mike thinks, because Big Mike knows me. I care what Mac thinks and Jen thinks, because Jen and Mac are really getting to know me. I care what you think, because you're getting to know me. I care about the people who I give that power to. So I hope that answers your question. It would not bother me if somebody came up to me who does not know me, and trust me, let me say this a different way. There's many a person who would probably come up and tell you Reg is not a good dude. Surprisingly. I can think about ex-girlfriends who may have their own things going on, who I may have wronged or most certainly did wrong to in the past, not anything drastic, but just wasn't a good suitor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I could think about people who I had beef with back in the day.
Okay.
And one thing that it's key to always keep top of mind if you do come across those people is that your life you lived every day.
Yeah.
From that point on, they remember you as what they remember you as. They have a snapshot in time of what you were, and if they haven't seen you do anything else since, then they probably still feel that way. And even if they didn't and they see you on a regular basis, if they don't truly try to understand or get to know you, or even deeper, if they don't even understand or know themselves, well, their perspective is not necessarily one that I respect. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's a bad perspective. It's just not one that Reggie respects. And if I don't respect your perspective, it doesn't mean I don't respect you. I just don't respect your perspective.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I respect people in terms of, like, I'm not spitting in anybody's face or not holding the door. I'd hold the door. I'll be honest with you. The people that I like the least in this world, I hold the door for them because I respect people. So it doesn't mean I don't respect you. It just means I don't respect your perspective. You have not earned the right in my eyes to judge me to me. You could judge me in your other group, in your friend circle, and they can draw a narrative and a conclusion based off of that, and I'm okay with that because, to put it lightly, those people don't pay my bills. You know what I'm saying?
Dang.
So it doesn't really bother me, and I hope that kind of answers your question.
No, it does, and I think, because I don't know if I've told you, I've always, not in a sense, cared about what people thought about. Well, let me just be straight. Cared about what people thought of me, and I guess I've come from caring to now almost like not caring. So same perspective, and I think this is why I have, I got a lot of love for you and Chris G, because I spend a good amount of time with you guys, and just talking even off camera is realizing that who cares, like you said, who cares what these people that aren't in your circle say about you, especially those people that have had a fraction of the time with you, or a fraction of an actual experience with you, and that's what they see you as, whereas you're that's not who you are. Let them think that way, because again, they don't pay your bills. And I think for me, it's because I've always had this perplexity of wanting to be liked by everyone and wanting to be seen as a good person, that it has kind of, not in a sense brought me down, but had this idea that I need to put up this front for everyone, every single person that I come in contact with, when that's not the actual thing that I need to do. And so I'm learning still to be okay, to become good at not caring what other people think, not caring about, Andrew's a good person or not, or if they talk about me, okay, whatever, I'm not close to you, you don't know me. Yeah,
you don't spend much of any time with me either, so
exactly,
my thought process would be, what minuscule amount of time are you drawing that conclusion off of? You don't go to bed with me, you don't wake up with me, you don't shower with me, you don't eat food with me, you don't go to work with me, you don't work out with me, you don't do all of these different things. So what minuscule period of time are you drawing that off of? And also, where is your perspective coming from? Did you see the entirety of the situation that allowed you to draw that conclusion? Or did you just see part of it and then you just got lazy and decided? You know something, Andrew? People are becoming extremely lazy in their opinions of others. And it takes very little information for them to be able to draw a conclusion. And that baffles me. It really does, because...
Let me pause you for a second. What do you... Just so, obviously, I can understand the people listening, what do you mean by becoming lazy in the opinions of you?
Yeah, that's where I was going. Lazy in the sense that they don't take almost any time to draw a conclusion. It's very quick, and it usually centers around a very unstable gathering of information, or unstable gathering of information. So, for instance, Andrew walks through the door and he let it go, and somebody was behind him. And I'm like, you know what? I've decided Andrew's a bad person. And I'm going to talk to people about how he's a bad person, because maybe that makes me feel better about me. Because my own perspective of my self-image is already jaded. And I'm looking for anything that I can take to make me feel better. And, Gary Vee talks about the best way to build something. And I think that this relates to a lot more in life than just businesses. But when he applied it to businesses, Andrew, he said, there's 2 ways to build the biggest building in town. First, you can go out and tear everybody else's building down. Secondly, you can just go out and build the biggest fucking building in town. Now listen to me, because I'm going to take you somewhere. The way that applies to everyday life and to everyone is like this. Individuals will use any piece of information they can when they are not in a healthy standing with themselves to make themselves feel better.
Okay.
They will put a Rite Aid Band-Aid over a gash that requires in-depth surgical attention. And I want that to be an extreme. I want you to envision what I just talked about. So they will look at Andrew walking through that door and not holding it for the next person. Just that simple understanding. They'll look at that and they'll say he's wrong, so that they feel like they're right. They don't even look any further. So let's paint the picture for them. Let's say that Andrew looked behind him and the person that was coming towards the door was not in clear sight. So he let the door go. And then that person rounded a corner and was then at the door. And that person knows they rounded the corner, and they understand why this person just let the door go, because they have a different perspective. Andrew has a different perspective. The person watching has a different perspective. But that person watching, if they are the person that I'm describing, someone of a lazy mind, they're not going to wait to think it through to say, maybe there's a reason why he didn't hold the door. They may just decide that you're wrong.
Okay.
And hilariously enough, they're wrong, because they didn't spend any time on it. And Andrew, this happens a lot. This happens a lot when people are not fully healed. I know, because I was not healed at one point. So I used ailments of others or the wrongdoings of others to prop myself up. I was a young man. I still am a young man, but I was a younger man at that particular time. And I didn't have what I needed to understand that probably the most important, and probably the key to life is self-respect. I was listening to a beautiful gentleman, Andrew Bustamante, who was a former CIA agent. And Andrew, this is a very nice name. And Andrew talked about, when he was asked the question, what is the key to life, by a gentleman, he said, self-respect. And he tells this beautiful story about a bar that he was at that was in an area where they had done training for the CIA and for many other military installations. And he said on this board was different words. And the question that was posed, as to which you could write one word or phrase on the board, was, what is the key to life? And there were hundreds of words. But the goal was, or the caveat was, that you had to tie that word to another word. The only visible word on that entire board was self-respect, because so many lines had been drawn towards that single phrase that there was no other word visible. And I would have to agree. The more I thought about it, Andrew, the more I realized that was, at least from my 27-year-old perspective, ask me again in 5 years, from my 27-year-old perspective, that was correct. The key to life is self-respect, because you cannot even begin to help others. You cannot even begin to consider the opinions of others. You cannot even begin to work on others until you have mastered yourself. And one of the, or if not the most powerful form of mastery, is to first respect yourself. You have to respect your body. You have to respect your mind. You have to respect your intent. You have to respect your heart. You have to respect yourself. If you can't do that, how can I expect you to respect me? You may fear me. You may like me. But do you respect me if you don't respect yourself?
Dang. Wow, I'm like, you out here spitting facts. That's very true. And I think I've just, based off of everything you're seeing, is me realizing, even as a watcher, a person watching other people, you know, open the door and leave the door, you know, things like that, that I myself have to hold myself aware to not be that type of person. Not that I am, but sometimes I could be, you know? I'm going to be transparent. Sometimes I could be. And realizing, Andrew, if you're not respecting that person, you're not respecting yourself, and vice versa. And it's being aware of that, and also being aware about it for myself. Because I've heard same thing. I've heard stuff. Oh yeah, they think, I've had people come up to me, yeah, I used to think you were totally a douche, or you were this or you were that, because just the way you walked or the way you looked or things like that. And I'm like, that's far from it.
Yeah, a question I would ask is why? Like,
yeah,
not that I'm gonna adopt your narrative, but I am quite curious of an individual. Why? Why'd you feel that way?
And I've asked, and I'm like, why? Like, why? They're just like, just because you just look like one. And I'm like,
yeah, that's not a lot to go off of.
And it's not, and it made it easy to brush off, because I was just like, okay, whatever. I just looked like that. RBF, whatever you want to call it. But then, as I was hearing it more and more and more, you know, especially at our gym, I was like, am I doing something wrong? No. And I've now realized that I wasn't doing anything wrong. But it was just like, when you hear it from like multiple people, and you kind of see that those people come from the same group, you're kind of like, okay, that makes sense. They all have the same mindset. They're all thinking the same. They're all, and so
they're communicating with one another. Yeah, they're
communicating that. And so it's like, now even having to be aware of that, and also having to be aware of myself, not to be that type of person, to be like, oh man, that person looks like, because you know what I mean? Because again, we don't know.
Yeah. I want to touch on that. It's so powerful what you're talking about, and I'm gonna summarize it, and I'm gonna put it into lesson form. You're speaking about that laziness that I was talking about. And one thing that's really interesting is to ask one really powerful question. And it's hilarious because the question is so powerful, yet it's one word. Why? And when you ask that question, you will find out just how airtight this person's theory is. And it's hilarious. It's hilarious. I'll tell you a story. I'm not going to say who it is because we know them, and I'll tell you off air. I was at a car meet. And this makes me laugh to this day. I'm at this car meet, and a guy pulls up and sees a sweater I'm wearing. And the sweater represents a business that I frequented at that time. And the guy gets out and says, the owner of that business is an asshole. And I was like, why do you say that?
I feel like I already know you.
I said, why do you say that? And he said, I cannot make this shit up. He said, because my friend told me he is. Andrew, he hadn't even met the person. Do you understand how powerful that is? That's how narratives move.
That's true.
Narratives are infectious. Listen to me, Andrew. Narratives are infectious. And the cure to infectious narratives is to think for yourself. And the way that you create the cure for thinking for yourself is by combining self-respect with a curiousness to learn. Because if you respect yourself and you understand that people have often disregarded you, you don't allow the opinions of others to take firm effect in your mind. And instead, you do part two, which is you do your own research. Because in that moment, I learned a very valuable lesson. I learned that there are probably people in this world who have never met me, but have a perspective as to who I am. Good, bad, doesn't matter. They've never met me. They have absolutely never spoken to me. And not only have they not spoken to me, they've never had long form, deep, meaningful discussion to understand my values. I no longer respect the opinions of the masses. I respect the opinions and I respect the narratives of the individuals who I meet when I feel as though they have earned respect. I don't understand. Actually, I do understand. That's a lie. I do understand how these narratives spread so quickly. And it's because of the adaptation of our media. It's because of the adaptation of how we communicate. It's because of the adaptation of short-term gratification as opposed to long-term success. It is easier for me to just simply adopt your narrative if it to some degree parallels another narrative that I already believe or value. So, case in point, political parties. And I promise you we're not going to go deep. Political party A says, we really like rocks. And you really like rocks, right? And political party A then says, we think we should drain the ocean because then we'd have more rocks. And we also hate water. And you go, well, that kind of aligns with me liking rocks. I think we should drain the ocean, killing all the animals in it. This is an extreme situation, but I can't make this up. This is what we deal with on a day-to-day.
So we left off on what was Arrow's perspective, right? Kind of the question that I want to pose is, especially for those that struggle with this, what are the next steps to step away from that perspective of caring too much of what other people think of them, even people, more specifically people that don't matter?
Of course, my answer is going to be somewhat similar to what it was before, which is the self-respect is key. Yeah. So I guess a better question that leads into what you're discussing is how do you gain that self-respect? And I think it starts with a lot of alone time. I don't know that that's the best way, but that's the way that worked for me. Yeah. I moved from San Jose, shout out to the Bay Area. I moved from the Bay Area down to San Diego about 3-4 years ago. Okay. And when I got down here, I immediately jumped into a relationship because I was scared, I was alone, I wasn't really comfortable with myself, by myself. And then when that relationship ended, I spent a good year just by myself. I had friends. Yeah. People talk to me, I promise. But I really just spent an entire year just completely alone. And that year was probably the most meaningful year aside from me moving from from Virginia to San Jose. And it's funny how these cataclysmic changes in your life often bring forth a lot of value if you know where to look for it. When I spent that time by myself, I remember sitting on a couch and having to genuinely think about how I felt about me. And when I explored that, I realized a lot of things that I was not fond of, selfish tendencies, anxieties, Sometimes going into spurts of overworking myself, which led heavily to the anxiety because I always felt like I wasn't doing enough.
Yeah.
But I also realized a lot of things I did like about me. Dude, I loved the way I laughed. I loved the humor that I could find in absolutely any aspect of life. I loved my intent for the people around me. I loved how, even though it was genuinely just my mother, myself, and my grandmother in a household growing up, I wanted this huge family, and I had made all these brothers and sisters who, none of which by blood, and we had begun these epic journeys together to understand life. I loved my taste in music. I loved my taste in food. I loved the way I loved. Dude. Man. And when I sat there for a while, one indication of how far I had come was a shift as to where I really started to want to spend more time with just me. Ooh. Man. I remember spending a good part of that year predominantly by myself.
Dang.
If it wasn't the gym and it wasn't work and it wasn't the occasional going out, it was just me. And I had things that I loved to do. Like at that time, I had a car that I really liked. I would just get in that car, Andrew. I had a loop around all of San Diego. I mean all of San Diego. That took about an hour and a half to do. I'd get in the car and do the whole thing. Just burn gas. Twice a week. By myself. And that's a luxury. I understand that. Everyone can't do that. I'd sit at the house. By myself. I'd watch YouTube videos I liked. I do things for me just to keep it nice and short. So I'd encourage people, if you can, because I know that space is a luxury, quiet is a luxury, alone time is a luxury. But if you can afford that luxury, then I recommend that you exercise that luxury. And really ask yourself the two questions I asked myself, which are, what do you enjoy about yourself, and what things do you maybe want to evolve? The next thing that I can say, and we're going to skim over it really quickly because of how often I mention it, is I did an audit on the people that I spent my time with. We talk about that all the time. My self-audit was very easy to do because at that moment in time, a friend group and a relationship had just begun their exit from my life. And it was now time for me to be able to usher in new faces, new ideas, new narratives. Yeah. And this brings me into the last point, which is be okay with change. Change does not make you fake, which is a concept in the narrative that I had at one point. It does not make you fake. It does not make you not a real person to decide to change your mind. And when I switched into this new friend group, I realized a lot of the things that I had believed in or agreed with before were not narratives of my own. Okay. And they were not ones that I wanted to further or reinforce anymore. And so I decided to change them. This happened once before when I moved from Virginia to California. I decided, hey, Reg, I don't really like the way that you tell so many lies. So when I got to San Jose, unfortunately, the pendulum swung a little bit far to the other side, and I became kind of a rude person to some degree. And I started telling a little bit too harsh of truths. And since I found a beautiful middle ground, but that would be my advice, would to be to do those three things. Spend time by yourself first. And last, feel very comfortable with changing narratives. And in the middle, make sure that the people you're around understand where you're trying to go. And make sure that they're either there or trying to get there with you.
I respect that, honestly.
If you don't mind, what would you do?
As you were saying that, I kind of like the first one, which you said as far as like spending time alone, I was almost forced to spend time alone. And I didn't think about it till you said that I was like, oh man, like that time that I spent alone got me to get to the point to where now it's like I have respect for myself, self-respect, to not care about what people say. Don't get me wrong, like there's times where I'm like, but like compared to where I was to now, completely different. I know I'm still a good person, but I've now grown less affected of what other people that don't matter perceive or say about me. And I spent a lot of time alone, and until you said it, I didn't realize that me spending that time alone was, in a sense, what got me here now. And so I appreciate that, and I feel like now you saying that, it's true. It's true. Spending that time alone, and it doesn't mean exiling yourself from everyone. It doesn't mean islanding yourself from everyone. It means doing the things that you love and you enjoy for you. And I would agree. I would definitely agree, and I would also agree on auditing. I had to do a lot of auditing myself and stepping away from friendships, relationships, acquaintances, whatever you want to call it, or even saying less to people that weren't necessarily friends or acquaintances, just associates or people that I went to the same gym with or stuff like that, but saying less to them for the mere fact of I now have this self-respect for me and continuing to grow that self-respect that you do not fit into that anymore. And so auditing, and I think that's a good thing for a lot of people, is learning to spend more time alone doing the things you love. And for everyone, it's different. It's different, you know, whether it is watching TV, going to the gym, or kind of just, in the lack for better terms, hobbies for yourself. You don't always have to be surrounded by people, because biggest thing for me was I always had to be around people. I was scared to be alone. I was afraid to be alone. And I soon realized now, I'm like, I enjoy being by myself. I'm like, I gotta spend less money because I can just do what I want to do. And I can leave to go do that thing when I want to leave, and I can leave from that thing when I want to leave.
Yeah.
And so I've definitely enjoyed more time, and I've come to the comfort of being alone. And I feel like that is definitely a skill, and I'm going to say a skill because some people, that's not something that they can do. It's a skill that you have to learn, is learn that skill of being okay at the bare minimum, or good being alone and just enjoying time with yourself.
Yeah. Can I add one?
Yeah, no, go for it.
I lied. It's 4. No, I'm just kidding.
He's back to this line.
I know. Switch back quick. everything I've set up until this point was a lie.
Switch it. Yeah, quick switch it.
What I'm working on now, this is a current goal.
Ooh, okay.
I've not yet mastered it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm getting real. I'm proud of myself. I'm getting real good. Search for adversity. The more adversity you go through, I can't make this up, but the easier adversity becomes, the easier it becomes to deal with it. There's a quote by a gentleman from a long time ago. You guys can look it up. And it says, easy choices, hard life. Hard choices, easy life. What it does not imply is that you'll make hard choices and life will simply become easy. What it does imply is that if you make hard choices aren't that hard anymore. And a lot of times, the difference between failure and success is that little bit of time that you spend procrastinating because you're afraid of the hard choice and what you have to do to accomplish the goal that you have in front of you, or the issue that you have in front of you. That 30 minutes that you procrastinate before you go to the gym, that 2 days that you procrastinate before you start applying for that job, that 3 years that you procrastinate before you ask that girl out on a date, the more hard choices you make, the more you become accustomed to failure, and the more you realize that failure can be your friend. And I do mean that. It can be your friend. And also, the more hard choices that you make, the better equipped you are to deal with further hard choices later on down the line.
100%.
When I say failure is your friend, I mean that. I look at failures now in a very welcoming way. When failure greets me, I greet it back. I talk to failure. I talk through failure. And I would encourage anybody who took the time to listen to this to do one of those self-audits and think about your relationship with failure. And remember that although our lives are finite, life with no unfortunate circumstances can be very long. And you have to decide how you're going to deal with the different aspects that life entails. Failure being probably the most important of them all.